So let's start the meeting. Okay. And, we're saying the minutes. Everybody good with minutes? Approved minutes?
Yes.
Yes. You go. Mary, you good with the minutes?
Yes, I said yes,
Okay.
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, so we approved the minutes, and so we can move right along down, and to you, Doug. So, thank you.
Put a little handout for you.
Okay.
Real quick, is this a status update on the listers? Mostly it's about the reappraisal. So we're on track for our initial round of inspections to be completed by March 1st. And then there's been a fair amount of construction. There's always ongoing construction. And so we're going to do another sweep inspection after we finish the basic reappraisal. So the goal of the basic reappraisal initial inspection is that we at least got to see the outside of everybody's place if we didn't get to the inside. And but the sweep inspection is there's many places where we've been there a year and a half ago and they got a new barn, so we're gonna just make sure we catch all that kind of stuff. And we do have 3 appeals kind of hanging over from last year that I just want you to totally forget about, right? The reappraisal chart, this little blue bars, just kind of shows our progress from 3 different points. The dark blue is from last July, the medium blue is from the end of November, and the light blue is today. And it just kind of shows that if you look especially at the done category, then that second category, we get a lot more finished, meaning we saw the inside, a complete inspection the way we'd like to do it. The exterior only marks the ones where we did not get inside, but we did see the outside of the property. And maybe the most significant one is on the far right, the remaining. So we're down to 143 parcels left to inspect as of today, whereas last July we had 720 left. That's how that chart kind of works. And that little map at the bottom, that's the town with the parcels color-coded to that little chart there. So the yellow, where it says scheduled, that's kind of our work in progress stuff that we're about to go there because we give people 2 or 3 weeks notice. The green means we were there and we got inside. The purple is the not taxed, so that's churches and town properties, cemeteries. The blue is the exterior only stuff, and orange is land only parcel, which means it just doesn't have a dwelling. There might be barns on it, there could be buildings on it, but there's no houses on it, and that's how that category works. You guys have any questions on
Not very late.
anything? You just had a good idea.
I wake up now.
So are all the cemeteries on here?
Yep,
We just can't.
they're very
This-
tiny in
yeah,
specs by the time
okay.
you think of the size of cemetery.
Okay.
How many can you visit in a week, say?
A week. Well, we're doing about, at this point, working 3 days a week, doing about 11 a day.
Oh, wow.
And when you get to certain areas, like we're gonna be up in Dale's mobile homes, you know, that's a lot of mobile homes, and they're all right near each other, so it goes pretty quickly. Our strategy was, when we started the inspections, we were trying to do the big farms and stuff first. It took a lot of time per parcel compared to, let's say, in the villages and stuff like that. So North Hartland Village, we're still, we're not in there yet either.
How do you feel about what the accuracy is for exterior only?
It's not as good as we would hope. For some of the exterior onlys that sold in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
Those are sales that we're gonna really, you care a lot about that, because that's what's setting the property values. So we go online to look at the realtor page. So we didn't get inside, but they've got 57 pictures inside their house. And so you can see the level of detail, and you can make some decisions based on
Okay.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So for the critical ones, that's what we did. For the other ones that were less critical, it might be an older mobile home, nothing's really changed. We didn't feel the need to,
Yeah.
that we'd have to do that so much.
Okay.
What are the reasons why you don't get inside?
Either nobody's home, and they might say, if somebody has no trespassing on their property and we didn't have any previous arrangement, then they won't go on their property without their permission. But like the postcard says, if we don't hear from you, we'll try to do the exterior work. So we do try to do that as much as we can. I think as a trend, compared to like 20 years ago, 20 years ago, you might have more housewives at home or people at home, you could catch them like that. Nowadays, everybody's working, or you're not gonna catch people like you used to, so we've had those discussions, they noticed that. As a trend, not just in the other towns.
So what was, you said the purple is not taxed, so, and you said cemeteries, churches,
Town, like Sunders Falls, town-owned property.
oh, yeah. What's that in the, let's say, the southwest?
That's the town forest.
Oh, right, okay,
Katy Brook, Freedom.
okay.
Does Tom ever work evenings to catch people that way?
If we need to set up an evening appointment, we might do that, but it's hard to look at, because he's looking at your outside of your house and property and grading how
Yeah.
it's situated and stuff, so. We do try to work with people, and we may need to do that. We've moved up to 3 days a week to try to catch all these properties. So while we do make efforts, and as part of the sweep, we'll have one last chance to, because there's just a handful of properties that we didn't get to at all up to this point, but we'll catch that at the end. In addition to stuff, like I said, that we know is under construction.
When's the finish date?
So, the finish date. So we're planning on filing our abstract in early June, as is the usual case. And it'll just kind of go through like a regular year, and then I expect we'll have more appeals than in a typical year. And Vermont Appraisal Company is working with us through grievance. So typically that's into July, let's say, maybe early July. If we have, I don't know, I'm expecting a lot this year, but. So I expect that when we say over, we'll be into July, and grievance is done, and then we'll be able to set the tax rate and stuff like that. But if there are any appeals that go to the BCA, that's where that kind of splits. So we're, so I think July is kind of the rough. if anything.
So all the grievances have to be done in the month of July? Is that what you're saying or not?
We have certain time frame to get everything done in, right? And so if we have a lot, we're gonna be really scrambling. So I have a strategy that I'd like to do when it comes to grievance, which is to try to deal with any one customer in a single day. Because we have to have at least 2 of us at every grievance. And just with our scheduling, I'll probably be at every one, and either Craig or Stacy will be with me. But if we can hear, let's say, six grievances in the morning, and then go and look at every property in the afternoon, come back and write it up, it's gonna be a long day, but you won't have to remember it one day to the next.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be different people in different groups, and I think that's how we might approach that. But we have something in a couple of weeks to try to get them all in. And then other deadlines kick off from that. So based on when we finish grievance, we have to produce minutes, and then the results of grievance. That starts off a 2-week thing. If anybody wants to appeal to the BCA, that starts that clock going. Goes from there. But we're going to try very hard to stick to the normal routine, because this is all tied into the to the tax bill. So we really don't want to have to move that.
Were we going to talk at this time about the state equalization results?
So you can, if you like, I did put that into their packet, and I did
Okay.
give a brief explanation of what it means in your managerial update, but if you'd like to expand on that conversation,
Yeah.
it's kind of what gave me the idea to have Doug come in and give an update to begin with, so I'm
Right.
sure that'd be fine.
Right. Well, I'm wondering if you could just further explain the CLA and the COD, the coefficient of,
So the CLA is the common level of appraisal.
yeah,
And that's a mechanism that the state of Vermont uses to make every town, so every town is supposed to be assessing to 100% of fair market value. So every town does their best, but we're not all the same. So there's some variation within that. And the state has this mechanism called the common level of appraisal that makes adjustments to how do we do compared to the average. So 100, or based on how the decimal point is there, a 1 is like perfect, or a 100 is perfect. So
okay,
we were just over, we were very close to that. So
right,
in that way, that means that taken as a whole, our appraisals are pretty close to fair market value. Because instant, but we have other things we're trying to fix, but that's what that number says.
okay,
Then the COD, the coefficient of dispersion, means if you looked at the properties from very low to very expensive,
right.
are we evenly, any mistakes that we've made, are they evenly distributed among that? Or, like, did all the high-end properties, we weren't right about just the high-end properties, that would show we're unfavorable to one group compared to the other, so that
Okay,
the coefficient of dispersion is, do we have random errors everywhere, or are there certain segments that seem to be targeted with more
okay.
inaccuracy?
I didn't catch that error part. I thought it was the gap between high-end properties and low-end properties, but it really is just,
It's not
The
necessarily
area
the
ratio,
spread, but
yeah.
it's when it comes to our
Yeah.
assessments. How
Okay.
accurate are we with our assessments relative to
Yep.
sales?
So is 13.09, is that a reasonably good score, or is that
It's
a
not
bad?
horrible, I expect that will be much better when we do the reappraisal, but it's nowhere near high enough for the state to trigger a reval, which is one reason that's used. The same with the CLA, we never got to that, a number so far out of whack that the state said you gotta do it. But it was recognized that we should do a reval for, anyway. Did that answer your question?
yeah, it does. And I guess the real question is, are we where we expect it with the state reimbursements? I realize this is really a school piece, not necessarily a town piece, but,
So it's almost two different things.
Yeah.
So the school reimbursement really depends upon the education fund and how much is voted on in the individual towns out there, and how much the state's going to reimburse one town versus another, and it's kind of a sophisticated equation that nobody seems to really be able to explain. And the CLA is basically, they implemented that ironically during like 2000, early to mid 2000s, when the market was really hot. And they felt as though the towns were behind in their assessing. So what they essentially do is they look at, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but they look at recent sales versus your assessments, and they kind of do an analysis of where they think sales are falling in comparison to your assessments. And then if it is lower, if your CLA is below the 1.0, they ask for a little bit more from the towns tax-wise toward your educational spending than if you're a little bit over. So what they're essentially saying is, if you're under assessing, we would like you to
Pay up.
keep track of that, so you're on top of things. Ironically, since that time, most towns have been a little bit overassessed, and that's kind of, we're just, I would say, slightly overassessed in comparison to some towns that, after the market crashed, they needed to kind of reevaluate things, do a reappraisal, and take a look at where they're at.
Okay.
Hopefully I did an okay job explaining that.
Clear.
Now,
It's okay.
I'm not the first to fail on that, so.
So what, Doug, what are you looking for or expecting for the is it COD to be after your job is?
After the cycle
This,
of
yeah.
reappraisal?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. On the one hand, it should be kind of reset, because on the one hand, from a theory point of view, you're never better than when you just did a complete townwide reappraisal. That being said, it's not 100% perfect, so I'm not sure. Our CLA will probably come in about 1. We're not far off from that now.
Mm-hmm.
But the coefficient of dispersion should be, I'm sorry, I can't remember if 1 is the right, where you want to be, or if it's 0. I can't remember, I'm sorry. I thought
And we're at 13.9?
percent, yeah, so 13%, so it's a percent. So it's going to be like 0% would be perfect. So if we completely evaluated everybody completely perfectly, then we'd have 0 dispersion and our CLA would be 1.
So do they base that on just 1 year's sales?
No, it's based on 5 years. So
Oh,
it's the
going
last-
back, going whatever back.
So right now, we go back,
Same.
we're looking at all the arm's length transactions from the last 5 years. That's what we're using to set land values and property values now. So,
And
and
they-
reappraisal that.
And they use the same numbers too.
Yeah, the states use the
Check
same
on it.
numbers, although for the states, there's slightly different criteria. If you subdivided a property and sold some of it, from the state's point of view, that's a non-valid transaction because it's not exactly the same piece of property you had a year ago. It changed, physically got smaller, let's say. But for our purposes, that could very well be a valid thing. If somebody split us and then sold it, we might use that we might use that to set the values, but this other parameter, the way we normally track it with the state, we couldn't use it because it's not exactly the same piece of property as last year, if that makes sense. So if let's say somebody buys a piece of land 1 year, they build a house on it, they sell it the year after that, that would be, from the state's point of view, that wasn't the same thing you bought because he improved it significantly, so it's a different thing now. So there's that
Makes sense.
aspect of
Any other question? Thank you, Doug.
it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's see. Well, you ready to talk about the budget?
Yep. So I'm gonna I printed these off, there's way more info than you really need, but figure I would give these to you just to have. And pass that down. One's highway, one is general fund. And I went through this.
Oh, okay.
Went through this before last meeting and went through it again before, something I screwed up here, I think, a little bit. And I'm gonna give this to you. There was a couple people that had questions after my comment went out on the budget versus the tax rate, but I will give this out. You can take one and pass one down. So going into the last meeting, if you remember, we made some deductions and additions. We mainly made some deductions about $9,100 for workman's comp and liability insurance and the Heartland Community Connections appropriation. We had gotten in the workers' comp and VLCT information, and we plugged those in. So that was in the general fund. There was a subtraction of about $9,100, and in the highway fund there was an addition of $133. So it came down, and then I just went through it today, and I just got 2 comments for today. I did make some changes in the highway department that nets $506 to the positive, so it adds $506 to the highway fund. And what I simply did is tweak in light of Dan Moranci. I lowered that person's, because it'll be I'll call it a Moranci replacement. I lowered that compared to what Dan had. And then I adjusted 2 others, one being BJ and one being Bill. And the subtraction and the additions added $506 between the 2. So I made those changes, and then the one other change I would mention is also in light of since the last meeting with the excessive rain that we had and some of the leaking that we've got in the rec center. We believe, and we're not entirely sure, but we believe the leak is coming in through the valley. So we had already talked about doing the work essentially to the ridge, that front part coming off of the building over the front steps, but the valley. So there's probably about $5,000 additional compared to what was in there. I didn't make any changes to that simply because there was $4,500 and $4,500 extra. If we didn't use it, was to go to reserves. So I would expect that we would probably utilize the $4,500 that's kind of hanging out there that potentially could go to reserves. For that valley work, I just didn't tinker with it and tried to leave the numbers as still as can be, but I don't, since we're going to be up there doing work and it is coming through, doesn't always come through to the offices, but it is coming through in the attic area to a degree. I think it's best that we fix that valley and button it up.
Is it slate or is there a copper?
So underneath the slate is like wooden laths that we don't believe has any tarp paper or anything under it, but he actually didn't think that was too abnormal since people that work with slate don't like to get the moisture to kind of build up underneath the slate, although he did say, in the valley area anyways, that at this point in time we would just due to what we're seeing there probably put some, I forget the name of the paper, but put something in the valleys to protect it.
Some type of membrane.
But he didn't seem too surprised that there wasn't paper underneath there. So
You're talking about disassembling the whole valley to put the thing, is that what it's called, to put that down? Back together
disassembling the slate part of it
in the valley.
depends on. I don't know how much. I don't think it completely needs to be reconstructed. A lot of it's going to be with the slate work and pulling it down. And
Yeah, no, but you can't put that down under it unless you get the slate out of the way. That's what I'm getting.
yeah, so it'll be. Yeah, I mean, so I guess I don't think the woods. I think there is some rot under there, but I don't think that needs to be.
Which side is of the porch? Is it on?
As you're looking up, it's to the left, right over. Literally right over Joe Olmsted's desk. Well, except for during this last rainstorm, it was coming in through the front hallway as well. But there is a watermark. It has, at some point, historically come through there at some point. And again, we seem to think it does. It's got to be because it's got to go through a fair amount of things before it hits. Visually, that, it's not, unlike the fact that we don't see it unless it's a real heavy rain. But there is some stuff going on in the next layer up that we should address.
So does insurance cover any of this?
I would hazard to guess that it's routine maintenance stuff. That, I mean, if it was due to a tree falling on it, I think that might be a different story. There's also some, while he's up there, he did also notice some air. Gordon, you might be able to help me out on the history here. Those two metal exhaust fans, were they for the cafeteria at some point or something?
I know.
It's not sealed. I mean, we can probably put like a sealant around that, and it may hold, another, budget year or something. But that didn't seem to be quite as noticeable as that valley. And he did. There was kind of a conversation about whether we should do the other valley while we're up there, but I think that based upon the budget, what we've got, I think taking care of that one valley and the ridge coming out, I think would be sufficient for where we're at. So that being said, to come back to this top sheet here, where that leaves us is with a budget increase over last year of 4.15%. It's actually less than 4.5%. However, it leaves us with a tax rate of 9.34%. And if you look at the highway fund on the front page here, you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here. The tax rate increase in the highway fund ends up being 22.87%, even though it's just over a 12.5% increase in the highway fund. The reasoning for that, as I tried to explain, is that last year, year-over-year budget in the highway fund was essentially, was just maybe a 2% increase. However, we utilized $90,000 of surplus money to go against the highway fund. So we actually had a minus tax increase in the highway fund of, I'm going to say like minus 6%. So we now need to, because it's an increase, that comes up, it's got to go up 6% just to get to zero, and then it goes up another percentage to get to where it needs to go. So it's a high tax rate increase in the highway fund, even though the budget increase is substantially less, giving us the overall tax rate increase of 9.34%, even though it's a budgetary increase of 4.15%. And what I haven't done, and what might be good for the conversation, is just to kind of show how the use of that surplus fund is kind of maybe leveled this roller coaster ride between last year and this year. With the tax increases last year and this year, it would have been kind of a little bit like this, and it's still kind of a steep incline, but is a little smoother than had we not utilized surplus money last year. And we are looking at utilizing $45,000 again this year to kind of soften that blow. So it was 90 last year, 45 this year, probably 0 next year. So we will see, again, a little bit of a bump next year in the tax rate, again, just because it's making up for surplus money that, revenue that we're not getting from the taxpayer.
So those changes you talked about are in the larger report?
Yep, there's a couple, I gave you the highway and the general fund separate. The front sheets to that packet is kind of the consolidated, abbreviated page that gives you an overview. And then if you undo the paper clip, you can get into the individual line items, revenue first and then the expenses. And those all predominantly stay the same with the exception of the changes that I gave you last meeting and the changes that I just highlighted tonight. So it's down roughly $8,400 from the original presentation. The majority of that, ironically, is in the general fund, but again, due to insurance and workers' comp numbers.
If there's a deficit this year, can you address that with the tax rate, or do you have to wait another fiscal year to budget?
So I would recommend at this point, and we are either next meeting or the meeting after the auditor will be here, but my recommendation would be to let the dust settle a year. I think that come July, I don't think we'll have the audit back yet, or we'll just be closing out the numbers. So I would see where we end up this budget, what the tax sales bring in for tax money against what we've got. You know, my feeling is that we'll still maintain a deficit. The number, I'm just not sure of. And then, yes, you can, the following year, you legislatively can take 3 different ways, one of which is you raise that deficit amount by increasing the tax rate in July to offset that. Does that make sense?
So it would be the fiscal year 21, you'd correct 19's deficit?
It would be, so in the summer of, we're going to finish this budget in June of 2019. So we would get audited numbers from fiscal year 19 in the late fall, winter of 2020. So it would actually probably be July of 2020 that you address that. It wouldn't include anything that happens in budget year 2020, but it would give us a chance, because we've done 2 or 3 things of significance here to try and help that deficit. I would try and hone in on that number the best we can before we make that decision. If we've got a clear picture in, the problem is we set the tax rate in like the third, our second meeting in July, and you know, we close the books on June 30th, so we're still getting, there's a tremendous amount of activity that happens between July 1st and September 1st. Is just so I think that we will probably have a pretty decent idea, but we may want to just let the dust settle. I think we'll know that question better in April, May. And truthfully, if we have a reappraisal and it does certain things to the tax rate, you may choose to try and address part of that then. I think it's a wait and see type of answer.
Yeah, I was trying to find the state police. I don't know just where it is.
So the state police is in the general fund portion of this. And it would be on, because you got the revenues and expenses. If you go to the expense portion of it, the second page of the expenses, you'll see it's called assessment. It's almost near the top. Here, let me see.
On the second page?
Of the expenses.
Second page, see the beginning of it.
So you go through the revenues and then you go through, you got the expenses. It's a separate stapled packet. Budgeted $56,000, which is based upon this year's budget, and thank you, Gordon, for bringing that up. I actually have one more comment on the budget. It's kind of an overall comment. I would just, a couple of you in general discussion, one of the things I've mentioned to you is that one of the most important things as a select board is to set the budget. The budget primarily outlines what we're going to do during that fiscal year, kind of sets and shows what the priorities are. This budget is very, very much basics. We're talking asphalt and slate roofs. That is primarily where the money is. It's going to, it's towards an increase in pavement and hard pack. It's towards an employee for buildings and grounds, and it is towards essentially Damon Hall, the rec center, and the library. And that is kind of it. And that's truly, from an administrative point of view, actually a fair amount. But that basically tells and points to what we'll be doing during this fiscal year. What is not out in there, and again, I see more of the basics for next year, but there's certain priorities that get tossed around from time to time. You know, Gordon mentioned police. There just are certain things that come up during the year. You know, for instance, when we did talk about the police, John Sanders was here. You know, it would behoove us to know or to work on priorities at some point that may not be within this particular budget. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to add it to the next budget. You can just deny or choose, but at least you've looked into it and we're better educated as far as what some of those things are. But I just wanted to point out that obviously, you know, this is what I'm asking the board to spend money on, and this is what we will primarily spend time on, are those things that are outlined in this budget.
Well, we don't have money to do all those other things. I mean, that's why we have this budget.
Well, this is the time to say we need that money.
Well, no, it's not. This is the time we have to finalize this,
It is.
right? I mean, it's too late
Well,
for,
I'm just pointing out, I'm not saying that you need to run out and take on 8 priorities. I guess what I'm simply saying is, is that the highlights of this budget is pretty nuts and bolts, asphalt and slate roofs. And that's the focus here, and that's what the focus of the budget is kind of what I'm throwing out there. I'm just reinforcing that comment.
yeah, we're addressing a deficit, and, I mean, we've talked about these other issues.
Yep, I guess I guess I'm just reinforcing the importance of the budget and where that directs us for the year, and just reinforcing the message.
Okay.
Well, what I'm getting at is that it seems in the comments that we've heard from people in town that is concerned about the police.
Oh, yeah,
How
yeah.
much varies from rampant crime to we don't have a thing wrong. But it seems to me that if we could increase the state police budget a little bit, we might stall off something much more drastic that might come along, which would cost us not $10,000 more, but $100,000 more. Meaning, if people get terribly concerned and we get maybe hire Windsor or create our own department with one officer or something like that, I mean, whatever, it would cost an awful lot more money. So I just wondered if it might make sense, and I don't know whether the state police are good for giving us a little more time or not.
Well, if you look at the budget and the actual, I don't know if it would do any good,
Yeah.
Because,
because it's 20,000 under what's budgeted.
in other
At least
words-
for 18 it
In other
was.
words, they're not giving us the
Yeah.
time that,
Right.
yeah, I don't, yeah.
Do the state police generate all the judicial fines, or is the constable?
State police is generating a good amount of them. James is bringing in some, but I think a majority of it comes from the state police.
But that's not reflected in this number.
And on the revenue it is.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
not
no.
in this number here. No.
And
If I,
that's $10,000, the judicial fines.
if I can just clarify, Matt, and Martin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think on the $20,000 on that year-to-date, I don't think, the invoicing didn't quite keep up. Have we seen an invoice from them? I think that's.
I was just looking at 18, but.
Yeah, I think that at some point,
They were behind.
they were behind on the invoicing, so that might not be truly reflected, but that being said, they do, on a month-to-month basis, have difficulty fulfilling the entire contract.
But they were a lot closer in 16 and 17, that's for sure.
That's all
Yeah.
I could say.
Well, maybe all we need to do then is to plead with them to fulfill their obligation to us. Maybe they could work a little harder at it somehow.
Well, maybe we should restart the talks about a regional police force.
Oh, yeah, that would. Just shocking about.
Well, I mean,
No, I mean, not to get them on the job more, but just to see how much that would cost, and maybe people in town would be more open to it than they were the last time.
Well,
right. And as we talked about, Dave and I, and Dave Singer attended a meeting up in Waterbury with, help me, Dave, the head honcho of the state police.
The colonel, I can't remember his last name,
Yeah.
but the colonel.
I mean, he spoke rather clearly about the statewide issues that small communities are facing, and the struggles of both the communities and at the state level to sort of address them. He reminded us that some of the state legislatures were pushing to push all law enforcement to the community level, which the state police were kind of trying to hold off and not do that. But the important thing that I learned is that they were exploring some creative options where they would dedicate to 1 or 2 or 3 state policemen to a community. They would still be on the payroll of the state police, but the town would pick up the cost, and that would enable the state police to replace those people, add 2 more people to it. I think our reaction was would really be good, because there would be a full-time presence, or more full-time presence. But it had a very, very big price tag at this point, and it was still an experiment that was only a year old or less than a year old.
Your old Waterbury,
Yeah. So I do think there's, as we experienced this summer, there's been unfortunate activities in town that I'm not sure police could change the outcomes of those activities. But I do think we have to pay attention to it and keep paying attention to it, and possibly look at these experiments that are going on within the state to see what options may be available for Heartland. Yeah, I'm not sure how you felt after that meeting.
It's expensive, but I think that I think there's a range of options out there.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of which option, which shoe fits, I guess.
all right.
I was under the impression, I think we have 3 state police officers living in town now.
I think I have a new neighbor, that might be number 4.
So that should help
Yeah, I would
I
think
don't
so,
know, just-
from
seeing the cars in town. and
cruiser
driving around.
visibility,
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not on duty, obviously, but.
Right. Anyway, the budget.
I think that the budget does address what a lot of people are interested in, is that the roads, you know?
Which brings up as secondary, it's amazing what you think of at 2 in the morning, but brings up something else I've been thinking of is, I do think that, although the police service is certainly a big thing to a majority of the population, when we, you know, I think when we do our work here, because of the situation of some of our assets and things, that it's important to look at where we're gonna get the bang for the buck, both for the taxpayer, who's it gonna affect, and who's gonna benefit from what we're doing, and also from the money that we're putting into it. And I think in this case, you know, everybody's using the roads, and a high proportion of the population comes through the rec center, Damon Hall, or the library at some point in time. And I think that to get those to a place that, you know, is from a maintenance perspective to where it needs to be, then I think then, you know, again, that's a pretty basic service to make sure that we provide. And I think that's what we're really kind of honing in on at this point.
I guess I feel that we don't really have a great degree of creativity or ability to have this grand vision, because we have certain things we have to do, and
Yeah, I think what's important for some, what I see for some next steps is to try and get us to a point, you know, so for instance, what I wasn't able to put together for tonight is some of the material that Two Rivers put together on the roads, and, you know, kind of an inventory on the paved roads and on the back roads. And it's kind of ranked as to, you know, poor, fair, good, you know, and the amount that those roads are used. So from a management perspective, it, you know, it makes some of these choices, you know, a little easier to, you know, to rationalize as to, okay, this is where we need to put our money next, and this is kind of how much we need to be putting towards, and this is what we've got coming down the pike over the next 5 years. Unfortunately, the list isn't generous to us. It's a fair amount of work.
yeah.
But I think that what, you know, as far as how do we prepare for some of these basics, I think that putting that information into, you know, a format that makes these decisions, you know, a little bit easier to know what we're going to need to do this year, and then maybe even 5 years out is beneficial to us. And if we can get over that hump, it might be able to allow us to look at some of the other things, knowing what our expenses are and what we've got coming down the pike. You know, we've done this, it's not dissimilar to what we did with the equipment, you know, the highway equipment and what we need to purchase next. And we've done some assessments to the buildings, we just haven't, you know, kind of prioritized it and put that monetary amount into something that is that we can look at and understand. But I think that what we've got on here for capital projects for this year is off of that list, and I think it's manageable and it fits in with where we're at from an expenditure point of view. But I think that would be, you know, a way of getting, you know, a leg up on, okay, this is what some planning part of the budgetary, you know, some of the basics of the budget, and kind of take some of the guesswork out of it. But it also goes back to, it also shows just how much, you know, we do need to do, and why, you know, we've upped some of these numbers to where we've upped them to.
So Two Rivers, that road inventory, that has to do with those new rules from the state?
This was actually, so we've got another one coming, which will also help us guide our ditching and some of the perhaps subcontracting work that we'll need to do going forward. So that is a very similar inventory that will highlight those hydro-connected areas and prioritize those that need to be done quicker than others. So that will be done this spring. We're in the pipeline to have that do them. Outside of that, I've lobbied them to help me put together one for pavement, just pavement, not the ditching. You know, hey, what's the state of our pavement? You know, Brownsville Road versus, you know.
So who's doing that?
Rita did that, and Alan, what's his name, that used to work for Hartford? Alan Ricker helped do that as well. So, and they put that together, and then Peter Fellows did, you know, some of the mapping and put that together into.
Someone has already inspected all the pavement and looked at everything and said, along with our records to tell where to go next, is that?
Well, what they did was they said, okay, this is poor, fair, good, and then said this is, you know, traveled X, Y, Z, and then it's up to us to kind of look at it and take it to the next level. And it corresponds with Brownsville Road being, you know, the top priority, which is kind of what we've got our eyes set on. So we're not too far off in that respect, but certainly, you know, okay, after 2 years and we're done with that segment, you know, where should we be looking at? And the process, given enough time, if we continue to work on the process, would tell us, okay, you know, next year we should be looking at this, in 2 years this, and, you know, maybe 5 years out, and then try to attach some sort of a price tag to that. So it gives us an understanding of, you know, where we're going over the next couple of years, just so that we can, you know, stabilize the budgeting a little bit. Take, again, right now, so, you know, we've been in this long enough that I kind of have a sense of what needs to be done, but at the end of the day, there's still a whole lot of, you know, what about this or what about that? Having it on paper and kind of starting to project out just makes those managerial decisions easier.
Dave, for the federally mandated, state-implemented hydraulically connected brooks or waterways, do we expect that there might maybe, are we going to need to use our own monies to do that sort of ditching? And I think Twin Rivers was being funded by the state for the inventory, but the actual implementation of that.
So there seems to be funding there now.
Yeah.
More than we can, at the moment, more than I can utilize. I'm not sure if it's more than any one particular town can. It's just that based upon our ability to focus on whatever we're focusing on, there's money there. Will there be money out there 3 to 5 to 7 years from now?
Right. I forget the dates.
That's an unknown. So if you are having a beer with Zach, I would put that in his ear. I already have.
Okay, I will follow up on that.
Or John, or Allison for that matter, and let them know that not to leave us high and dry, because there's 25 years worth of work out there to do. And
no pun intended with the dry part.
the attention span of the legislature sometimes, you know, moves on after 2 to 4 years. So this is one that there's consistent work out there over a significant amount of time.
Right.
My fear is, and you know, I know West Windsor thought as though there wasn't enough funding now. My fear is just 5 years from now, they just forget about it. They've moved on to some other grand issue.
Yeah.
So you can put a bug in.
So maybe we should do our roads ASAP. Well, there's still some money.
Well, there's just enough to make you do a little bit.
Oh, really?
What was it, $20,000?
Yeah, we had 18, I think, total this year. You know, we paid 2 to 4 out of that. The project didn't take up that, so we're gonna do some more in the spring. But yeah, that's, and truly, you know, just where we're at the moment, just, you know, being able to focus on getting, the hard pack down and the grading and other things to set up and have, an outfit come in and do the ditching takes work and time and planning to do that as well. So, our ability to just turn around and say, okay, let's go ditch, a mile and a half of road is just, it's just difficult.
Right, and the ditching we need to do isn't necessarily connected with the hydraulic connected brooks.
Well, so
Yeah,
there's,
just
therein
looking at-
lies a little, so some of our roads may not be marked on the hydro-connected areas,
Yeah.
because it's not going into a stream or something that may have a runoff issue.
Or it's ultimately not connecting to the Connecticut or to the,
So this money is for the hydro-connected areas, so we need to focus on those, but
yeah.
I would say that if we back up to a macro, view of this, if we were to focus on those priority hydro-sensitive areas and continue on those hydro-sensitive areas, I think we will get to areas of road that need to be done
Need to be done, yeah, sure.
regardless. So I think that, when you sit here and you're like, okay, where do we start?
Yeah,
That tells you where to start. I think that we end up connecting the dots after a few years on that.
good. So I'm happy to hear that Twin Rivers is going to be engaged with the survey. Two Rivers, I'm sorry.
I wonder if we have an inventory of the damage caused by Irene. Because that would tell us where we need to work.
I think that we do have quite an extensive work effort from Irene that we've just recently gone through.
We're waiting for one phone.
But we did pull some stuff out from Irene that kind of shows us where we had a whole lot of work that we did. But again, this comes down to, it's not always,
Well,
they're similar.
Some of it had nothing to do with ditches.
They're similar, but
Some of it.
there are, again, if it's, it needs to feed into the tributary that's gonna go someplace. And a lot of times that's what happened, but, it should tell us what the worst sections are, and we'll start there.
So what would you like to see here
So if
regarding the budget?
everybody is in support of the proposed budget, the select board should adopt it.
Do you want a motion?
No, I don't know. Not quite yet.
Okay.
Have, who's gone over it line by line?
Well, I haven't gone over this line by line. We just got this.
This is changed only by 4 line items since the last one that you saw, so,
Yeah.
and it has to do with highway wages and highway FICA. They even be 2 expense lines, but I think it's one's in summer and one's in winter, so. You had the the copies that were sent to you in the presentation, and then I gave you last meeting the changes, netting what those changes were, so it should be fairly up to date. With those 2 changes in the highway department, again, being a $506 increase.
we need more time to look
Well,
at this, Gordon?
I guess not, but I think I'm looking at these percentages, and the ones that went up a lot are all really low, small numbers. You know, for the most part. And then the first one, total administration, is pretty significant. Might address that a little bit.
$50,000 for legal is the substantial increase there.
Yeah.
I think we discussed that quite a bit about
Yeah.
what we got coming down for the assessors and listers, and not to mention, and I can get into this couple agenda items down, but you know, we'll probably have some legal issues with the Michael Blake property, and perhaps even another junkyard property or two. But the main increase in administrative was for legal purposes.
Don't we have money from the state for reappraisal?
We
Right.
do.
Are we gonna go through all that?
I don't think so, because Dave was keeping my nose to the grindstone about my budget, and
So, would there be any money in that? Could we use any money in that for legal expenses? No?
It stays for appraising, doesn't it?
It's meant to reappraise.
it's about the reappraisal, so there's other things there that are typically allowed in that, including some of our mapping services, or we bought some computer stuff to get ourselves ready for this, and that's all allowed. Some places do. Yeah, so some, I think the towns have some leeway there, but in terms of what could be spent on, but it's ultimately for you guys to decide.
The next reappraisal will be a substantial amount of money. I mean, we're talking, what was the contract this time, 80? We need to ensure that we can do reappraisals on a timely basis, every 3 to 5 years.
Oh,
You know, that may be, you know, something that Doug and I will need to have a little bit more of a conversation on, but certainly to go 18 years on a full reappraisal is not healthy.
so I thought they were supposed to be done every 10 years. Now you're saying 3 to 5?
It really depends on, so our goal is to hit fair market value. If the market is flat and not much happening in the market, then chances are values aren't gonna change a lot. If the market's doing this and this and this, technically, we're supposed to follow that and that and that. So if we have a few roller coaster years, let's say, that might spur to have a rebound on sooner than that. My strategy would be, after we do this townwide appraisal, there's techniques that we could focus on a subgroup at a time of the type of properties we have, and kind of do a rolling thing where if you get back around every 4 or 5 years back to the same group, then you could perhaps wait longer before having to do a full-blown thing. So as we get our act together better locally, we're going to be able to do that after we get a good firm start this year, after this year. So that would be a good place for that.
Okay. Well, Gordon, we were comfortable with this,
Mm-hmm.
so
I don't think there's anything in there we can do anything about it.
Right.
Okay.
I'll make a motion, we accept the proposed budget for the year 2020.
fiscal year, okay. I'll second.
Okay. Phil, you
Yes.
happy? Okay. It's a done deal.
So this is the budget that's going to be voted on at town meeting.
That's right.
I can give you a hard copy of that if you need it.
Okay, what do you want to talk about the intersection?
So I put this on and actually realized that maybe I didn't necessarily need to once I put it on, but last meeting I said that I had a couple questions for the engineer before we proceeded. And the two questions I had were essentially to make sure that I did indeed understand the engineer on the alternatives. Him and I are in agreement on that, and I'll just, again, reaffirm a little bit of our discussion on that. And the difference between the time and expenses and cost and fixed fee. The original agreement was cost and fixed fee, and this is time and expenses. And he was gonna get me essentially the fee page for that, just so that I can make sure that I understand what we're looking at for hours and work effort. And he said that he would get that for me, but today was his first day back from vacation since the last time we met. So I don't have that, but nevertheless, I am fairly comfortable with the fact that the time and expenses and cost and fixed fee are fairly similar. Just kind of a different, I'll just leave it at that without getting too into it. It's just that I haven't seen the fee page yet to make sure I understand where we're at. So once I see that and have that conversation with him, I will feel comfortable, completely comfortable with what we've got here.
So you want us to sign this tonight?
Actually, looking at it, you don't necessarily need to sign it. It says client authorization, so if you want Gordon to sign it, otherwise I believe Bob has signed them in the past. You've kind of indicated that you want to move forward in finding this detailed information. These two items are just, at this point, it's just one item, is to make sure that, you know, what we're getting is, you know, that there's an understanding of what we're paying and what the work effort is. Really is kind of a finer detailed thing. Just to come back to Phil, your conversation on this, and in my conversation with him today, yes, you know, we're not going into this saying, you know, all right, let's stake out 3 alternatives and let's choose one. Mm-hmm. It will be, you know, getting in, having a conversation with the individual utilities. Mm-hmm. As that conversation develops and, you know, as, you know, certain things are brought up as far as issues or what needs to be dealt with, then it'll be, you know, okay, can we work through this? Do we need to, you know, find a different alternative? Or, you know, one alternative we will look at would be maintaining the north-south corridor and
Good.
digging. But what won't happen, though, is, you know, we may, you know, we've got, you know, not to use, we will get to the details, but we're not going to come up with detailed specs for both alternatives. At some point, we're going to have to come back to you and say, you know, look, here's the general cost of this. here's we already kind of know the general cost of this.
Right.
You know, what is it, where do you want us to spend our work effort so we can come up with that detailed information for a town meeting? you
Yeah,
know,
I'm,
so-
I'm comfortable with that approach.
Okay.
As long as that's out there.
So I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
that was all mapped out, you
Yeah,
know, and
great.
him knowing that if this gets shot down, then the design work that we've done on the mapping that we've done kind of goes away,
Yeah,
and we still need the underlay, you know, it's truly an overlay in this case.
okay.
And that, if it gets shot down at town meeting, we peel that back and we've got the original.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
talking that through and making sure everybody was on the same page was kind of important. But I think at this point in time, the board is prepared to move forward on this.
Yeah.
The cost stays the same, 10,500. It's just a matter of me making sure that I'm comfortable with the details. If we're still in that position, then I have no problem kind of bringing this forward and signing it and us moving forward with it.
So, really, I mean, there's only one thing in task 2 that he'll do at this point, and he won't even do task 3, will he?
So we won't, as I talked to him, there's no need to go, for instance, the permitting, which I think is task 3. There would be no need to continue on in the permitting until this passes a bond vote.
All we're really asking for is an estimate.
So what we do need though is to update the plans to kind of correspond with what we're all looking at here, and to update the engineering estimates. We wouldn't update, even though that includes updating some of the bid documents, but we won't actually put pen to paper on the bid documents. You know, there's no, you know, that would be a finished document that we're gonna submit to Teresa for permitting. We don't need to take that step. So, as I did point out last meeting, this is kind of a soup to nuts. You know, this should get us to, if it were to pass a bond vote, the 10,500, provided that the work effort holds to what we think it's gonna be, should be enough to take what we've got, plus the information we obtained from the utilities, put the two together into a packet, send it to Teresa, and it would also entail, you know, would be a bid packet for the contractors as well. So you're right, we shouldn't need to go the full length on that.
So I don't see any map here showing where this is going to be. And who's making decisions about where this starts and ends in 1, 2, 3, 4 different directions here?
So we're gonna start with the map that Green Mountain Power has put out. I don't think you've seen it, but it was a map to bury the lines in the intersection here. We would start with that and make sure we have all the utilities in together and again, get their feedback as to, because we've gotten some feedback that certain things in that design don't work, or it may work better if you do it this way. And we'll go from there, knowing that you would prefer that pole instead of that pole there. You know, I think was the gist of kind of the work effort that,
Yeah, how about
the
another-
feedback I've got.
How about other directions? I mean, to the next pole, you know, the other 3 points?
So the other one comes up at a pole just beyond the post office, and the other one comes up north on a pole right after whatever one is north of this one here on that side, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and there's probably one on Creeksy Road too, I think. Yeah.
Yep, and then, yep, which is out towards Tom's house, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Dave, I didn't understand on the task 1, the deliverables that VHB was going to do duct sizing. And then it's if needed. So I thought that was the responsibility of the utilities themselves. to determine I'm just not familiar with that phrasing, what they're referring to. I'm not sure if you know it or not.
I think he's got, again, properly sized duct banks if needed. I think he's just making sure that, to coordinate and understand the existing utility services and needs, identify the potential conflicts, and, for instance, the conversation as to whether, multiple utilities can use one conduit, something
Right.
that I had ruled out, that he says now it might be a possibility,
Right.
or, what to do with consolidated. My understanding as far as the deliverables here, again, is to take what Green Mountain Power has provided, to walk through what they've provided, and to make sure that we as a town, because at that point he's functioning on our behalf, understand how this is going to work and come together, so that when our general contractor has to do this, there's a general understanding of what needs to be done, both from their labor and from their materials that they may or may not need to use, and is there any synergies here that we might be able to pull together in making this work. At the moment, that's all been kind of 6 or 5 separate utilities, kind of just, okay, this is just
Right,
in
right.
ourselves.
And we didn't explicitly state that we would like to create or empty ducts for future expansion.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation that we'll probably go through. There would be a little cost to that, but there's something that we might be able to lease out to other utilities that would come through in the future. So I think that was feedback that we got from the individual utilities, that it would be wise that you put at least a couple extra down, so
Yeah.
that option exists.
Good.
Boy, some of this, I wonder if some of this is going into private property. It is, isn't it? It's a rights of way issue here.
So this may create more right-of-way issues, correct?
No.
Don't utilities have some kind of,
In the state highways, they do.
oh,
And even for that matter in ours, but still doesn't negate the fact that, all depends on where it lies and what is there. May not create any issues, and then again, it might create some. That
so
would be-
somebody could hold up the project if they didn't want to give it permission.
It all depends, possibly. Then again, maybe we come up a pole before, or don't bury them, or, that just, we don't know until we look. So that would be something that I would rather know now than spend X amount of money and find out that we can't do it because somebody's not gonna give us an easement. So. Not too dissimilar to, we're still, I think the talks are going good, but, working with Matt and stuff is just harder at the end of the line than at the beginning of the line, that's all.
It's good that everybody is, that Dave can sign the contract. Okay. I guess the only other thing I was gonna bring up, I don't know if this is the right time or not, but, because we're talking about the intersection in general, we aren't really, we're talking about wires and carrying wires, but I've experienced close calls coming through this intersection, and I just think that
Yes, me too.
it would be good for people to realize that, to watch out. You know, I, 2 different times recently, coming up from the Windsor direction, coming this way and turning onto Route 12,
Mhm.
the oncoming car coming around the corner didn't stop.
Mhm.
Just like half a second before, if I'd been there, you know, we would have been too close.
And the way the
Is that-
cars park in the bank corner.
Yeah, oh,
You
yeah.
can't really see that very
Turning
well.
around, but I'm talking about coming this way.
Oh, coming that way.
Coming this way and having cars coming, or going south on 5, coming around the corner, happened, about a week, 10 days ago, coming back from Windsor. And that was a pickup truck, and they were moving along, I would think 30 miles an hour maybe, right around the corner, and didn't even slow down, they didn't do it.
Yep.
They just were driving on the open road,
Yep.
and away he went. Probably headed to Windsor or the interstate, who knows? But, and I was just barely far enough back so that all was well. But anybody coming from Windsor and turning onto this road really needs to make sure their blinkers on and pay close attention, because there's
Mm.
every now and then somebody, I don't know, I really wonder if if that stop sign should have a blinking light on it. I have seen them where there's a stop sign and there's a couple of lights that
Mhm.
are flashing red.
I just had a recent near miss too.
In that same,
Oh, yeah, exact same time.
yeah,
But that's like the 3rd one I got.
yeah. I just think people driving on Route 5 don't expect to see a
Right.
stop sign.
No.
And they're in way too much of a hurry, and then who knows what they're thinking about, or what they've been consuming, for that matter. But
Mhm.
Oh, they also, as I'm sure you've all seen, they're the traffic crossing lights for pedestrians now, where a pedestrian can press a button and LEDs flash.
Yeah.
Those are very effective. And I would hate to have a flashing light that flashes all night long.
I know,
You
I
know,
thought about that too.
and I'm not sure
Uh,
if it's something, if technology would allow it to be triggered as the car approached,
Mm.
much like the radar pieces. But,
Yeah. Well, I suppose we could inquire with the highway department, transportation, see what's available.
yeah.
Ask them about it.
Dave, we requested from the district, one of the radar, I forgot what they call them, the portable
Speed.
radar readout pieces, and they said, oh, sorry, theirs was broke or something like that, and I guess we never heard back from them.
They confirmed it.
It's
They
broken.
confirmed it was sitting in the
Yeah.
back of next to a fence somewhere, and
Yeah.
that's where it was gonna stay.
So I think that's another very effective way to let folks know feedback as to what their speed is as they approach certain areas. Those have to be placed, according to the state, by a speed sign, or, a posting of the speed limit.
Yeah.
That would at least be one step toward.
Yeah.
alerts.
Well, this particular truck was coming through at, like I said, about 30 miles an hour. It is not over the speed limit,
Yeah,
but it's over the safe limit.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
You know, it's just, and especially when you're supposed to stop.
Yeah. I still have a name somewhere in my email of the Montpelier guy that sort of started pointing us toward the district. I'd be happy to write back to that guy.
So there's one of those mobile speed indicators for this area,
This district,
this district, and that's it? And they're not getting it fixed?
because a lot of towns are now buying their own. So if you look around at the ones that are out there, they're the village of Woodstock or the village of town of Norwich or whatever Norwich is.
I wonder how much those are. A lot.
No idea.
Wonder how much it would cost to pay to fix the one? You know?
Yeah.
I'd have to quit my job so I could wade through the paperwork and get all that done.
Okay, that's all I have to say.
There's an expense to them. I
Yeah.
can't remember,
Yeah.
they're 4,500 or 7,000.
Oh, forget it.
I think they're, I was looking for, ran into an issue on Hobson Lane in Norwich, and an alternative was the blinking lights, and I think that to have two of them, one each way, was gonna be about $7,000. So they're about 3,500 maybe.
A blinking light on the stop sign?
So, you know, not the blinking light on the stop sign, but that would probably have an expense as well, but the ones that kind of flash your speed as you're coming, you know, so it's got the speed limit 35, and if you're going 38, it starts telling you you're going 38. Those were
3,500.
over 3,500 at that point in time.
Solar powered.
Yeah, and if it rains just right, they go out, but tweak them again.
If they get spray painted, that's not good for them either. I've seen that.
You had it?
The other one that's on Hartland Hill going down to Woodstock. Got completely spray painted black. It didn't work very well.
Oh, no.
I don't know what they did. They cleaned it off or what they did. Yeah, okay, let's move along if we're done. Jump to ordinance enforcement.
So, this pertains, I shouldn't say mainly, I guess what popped up on the radar recently is the car over on Weed Road in the Coley property. Given our history there, Mr. Mamby knows it well, so I notified him that this had popped up, and him and I have given it some discussion. He really isn't supposed to have anything there unless he's got himself certified, which I don't believe, we haven't asked, but I'm not thinking that he is, and the car is at least uninspected, which puts it out of, you know, puts it in, makes it, you shouldn't have it there being uninspected. So part of the conversation is, well, what can we do about it? And as you can see from some of this email string here with Robert Mamby, you know, his last one here is, you know, one from the date of discovery to when we can actually start to take action is 90 days. It was there prior, but I did note it and take a picture of it on December 3rd, which gives us 90 days from there. Then we would need to, you know, take essentially legal action to force him to remove it, of which case the judge can, you know, say a lot of things. He can have him move it, but he may also ask him to just simply have it inspected, which I don't think it can, but either way, it is a legal process which we would need to embark on. My fear here is that for this fiscal year, we have maxed out plus our legal expenses. So my last email to Robert was, you know, look, I'm going to just, you know, notify the board as to where we're at with this and get some direction from the board as to maybe how we want to proceed, because Mamby's response was kind of, you know, if we let Mr. Coley know now, you know, what the proceedings may be, you know, we can head that off and maybe work towards a resolution of some sort. But just know that once we embark on that, if there is no resolution, then, we end up taking legal steps, which would happen probably in the spring. We just don't, we're not, we're kind of in budgetary jeopardy at this point, so, embarking on that, I just wanted to throw this out, let you know where this stands and some of the steps that we would need to take and kind of where we stand budget-wise on this.
Is there any way to resolve it without spending any money, for heaven's sakes? We spent enough money with that property.
What if we towed it down to the pit,
Why would we move it to our property?
so we could come and retrieve it?
Or not.
I think that might be stealing.
I think that's a good idea.
So what time should we meet?
So why are we focused on that property? Because there are certainly other properties in town with many, many, many vehicles on them. I know because we've had trouble and you're trying to ward off.
Yep. I would actually make a similar comment in that as we talked about priorities for budgetary things, I think that if we really want to get our arms around this, that would be a budgetary priority I may discuss, at some point in the near future. But the time and effort involved to, deal with some of these properties there is a time and effort to it, and there is certainly multiple properties out there. I would give it at least a dozen, that's just off the top of my head, that are in a state of needing to be addressed. So I would point out that I think that the town should look to be somewhat consistent on this, and there's an effort in doing so, and I think that a lot of times what happens here is that by the time we do address it, it's it's beyond, it becomes even more difficult. There's time and effort just to enforce it beforehand, but in the case of what I can see from Bob and what I can certainly see from myself, you've got focused on other things such as the intersection and other highway issues and stuff like that. When you've got multiple properties that really need attention, that's just a difficult thing to do. And I think that that's a reasonable question. I think it would need a concerted effort going forward to be more consistent in our response.
Wood property is in a sense a little different in that we have a significant investment in cleaning it up, and Fred owes for a lot of fines for, I should call him Mr. Coley, for not complying with what he was supposed to do. And I'm of the opinion we should follow through with the rest of the project. And we would, at some point, we might end up owning the land, and then we could sell it to someone else. But there are a few steps to do that. Whether we would actually come out ahead money-wise, I don't know.
I don't think so.
Well, it's quite a lot of money that we got into that.
I know, so I don't think we'd come out ahead. It's a small property.
Well, is there any harm in taking the next step of, to reminding Mr. Coley that he's in violation? Or is this, we've done this so many times that we have a track record of no response?
You don't know.
That sounds like what Mr. Manby is suggesting.
Right.
Is that correct?
in order to get to where we've gotten with that property, we had to take
Slightly more
significant
volume.
amounts on ourselves in order to get there, and I suspect that, we would need to take some steps to enforce it once again. The reason why I did come is, my just feeling is that once we kind of embark on that, then we need to be somewhat prepared to, if we say, hey, look, oh, by the way, remember this, judgment that came down 4 years ago, hey, remind us, and we understand it's out there, and, got 90 days, and, my feeling is that you need to be prepared to take that next step. I would normally, and again, I would look at consistency kind of across the board on these properties, but I would prefer to be more proactive than we have been. But I also know that we're in a budgetary situation that, our legal expenses are above and beyond what we had, and it's causing pressure on the rest of the departments at this point.
So would you suggest we just ignore it?
I, provided that the answer isn't go out and grab him today, or start pursuing this, I think that what I would do is just continue to toss around some possibilities with Rob without trying to rack up too much just in that. But just say, hey, this is our situation, how, what are some ways to kind of, alternatives, and there may not be many, but that would, in my mind, be the next step.
One of the things that I remember from Bob Stacy saying that before we even think about owning that property, we should test the soil to see if it does have bad contamination.
I thought
We didn't do that.
I thought it was tested.
I don't think so.
It wasn't,
No.
I thought it was only oil there.
Well, there was some concern that some oil might have been spilled or dumped, and we ought to take a look. And if we found the lot to be clean, which I would hope it would be, I'm not too concerned, then we could think about owning it. What are we making the steps to ask Fred to pay up or give it up, which he might decide to pay up. I don't know. So, but that certainly could best be done when it's not frozen. So spring is a good way to put it off till spring at least.
We have to have the landowner's permission to go on the property, right?
Judgment, basically, I had reviewed it with Robert, and I've reviewed this with Two Rivers, that the judge gave us permission to essentially go on and test the property.
Oh, okay.
So I'm of the opinion that we wouldn't need the property owner's permission to do that,
Okay.
which may have been the thought process before I got here. I don't think the property owner was overly excited about that, but I believe the judgment gave us permission to do that, at least for the initial analysis, to do that. And I mean, again, this is not, this is a project, so, there's the possibility of attacking this with Brownsfield grant money through Two Rivers, but again, that entails, getting into that and setting things up and doing it. That's
Who does that testing? I forget the name of it.
I don't know who does it. They contract out.
Do you remember?
Harper.
Oh, yeah, Harper Environmental,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay. Is anything
Okay, what? what is the upshot?
Shot is, I'm not gonna do
Not do
anything.
anything right now, okay?
I think that's the upshot.
Yeah.
I don't think that car is gonna cause us a lot of trouble.
What?
I don't think that one car is gonna cause us a lot of trouble over the weather. I don't think it'll pass inspection if that was the case. And the registration's gonna run out.
Well, can't you have 3 unregistered vehicles on a property as long as they're behind a fence?
But there was a specific judgment in this case.
Oh, okay, so
Going
we'll go
against
back.
his ability
Right,
to
right, right.
kind of overrules that. And so we would need to
Right. Okay.
bring that to everybody's attention.
Right.
Okay. What have you got in mind about town meeting prep?
So we need some pictures.
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 We need some
Give me
pictures.
your camera.
Tonight, I'm not prepared for this.
Not pictures of us for the
Okay.
cover.
Actually, sooner rather than later on the pictures, for you even.
So if you got some,
Photoshop one
for the,
used last year.
Thank you.
No, there wasn't one last year.
Oh, there wasn't?
No,
who used the, is there one in the book last?
mm-mm. There were no pictures in the book last
There
year.
was a picture
took
of
a
the
picture.
select board.
Yeah, there was. It was horrible.
Yes, oh, very much so.
We're just missing one.
It was what, horrible?
Joe was.
Horrible. Oh,
Oh, there was your shiny faces there.
There
Oh,
was.
yeah, that one made it.
Shiny faces? What does that
Absolutely.
mean?
Shiny, happy faces.
No.
Doesn't mean anything.
That song, Shiny, Happy People.
So there's no pictures for the cover either?
That was, so
Not yet.
the source has not provided us with what we
Why?
need.
I thought that was gonna be easy.
Well, when I talked to Carol Bauer, she said she would look and send us some options, but she wouldn't get to it until this afternoon, and I said the meeting's this afternoon, so I assumed she didn't get to it. So that's all I know about that. I'll see her again on Thursday, and I'll ask her again.
Well, Gary probably has a bunch.
I think Gary came up with, I was just noticing, that last year's picture is right over there, right?
It is, yes.
So is there anything else over there?
I noticed that the pictures that the Historical Society sent to us are all in Damon Hall somewhere.
So walk around.
So
This is the middle picture in the bottom.
Right.
if you were to walk around and say, hey,
Right.
I really like that one, then I'm
we all set.
sure that they can find that for us.
But they must have
But didn't
thousands
Gary,
of pictures.
didn't Gary do that? Well, they do have thousands, that's
So people-
probably,
When's the deadline for?
I would have liked it to have been today. The
Today.
21st is starting to get a little late in the game. We need to wrap, so we're in the process of doing a layout as we go here. And we really need to have that all in place before the end of the month. So as we inch towards the 21st, then we're really kind of got our backs up against the wall there. So
Well,
that,
These will be electronic. We could see them electronically, right?
I'm not sure what we're looking at electronically at the moment. I think last time, you, Gordon, got them from, I can't remember his name.
Gary. Tractor.
No, I don't think it was. Gary? That was somebody else.
I think it was from.
Was it Gary?
Yeah.
Not sure if we had them electronically or whether we had them like.
The reason we took that picture, I think, is because that what's called the Ladies' Aid Hall, they used to be used as the town meeting there. And that storefront steps is just across the road. But quite questionable whether what we saw and what we said we saw were actually the same thing. Anyway, it doesn't really matter.
So I guess if somebody wants to take that on as a homework assignment and get them out to us,
Take one on the getting,
the picture, corralling some pictures and getting them out to us so we can get, maybe what we did with the writing and come up with a decision. I can pass that on to Laura and we can put that into the layout.
well, I'll follow up with Carol. I
Okay.
mean, she sounded totally willing to
Okay.
look, but I guess it just didn't happen today, as she told me.
Not by 4 o'clock anyways.
And are you saying you need an individual picture or a group picture of this esteemed group?
I can steal a picture, but the front picture is what we need.
Who's the front?
Besides the esteemed picture of you folks, is the actual, what I'm concentrating at the moment is the front picture to this.
Yep,
Is
right.
an integral component to this.
You know what might be good? Would be, which they have a lot of over in the Historical Society, is a picture of our grade school class taking on the steps, maybe 75 years ago, something like that. It's kind of neat, especially if you know the people in the picture.
There aren't too many people left who would know who those children are.
Well, some of them are familiar.
We have lots of those class pictures.
There are a lot of those.
Be hard to
I was just
choose
thinking that.
one year.
Well, just choose them all. Yeah.
We could see one with little Gordon Richardson in it, that'd be interesting.
I'll ask Carol for that.
Well, I always look at those when I go through on 4th of July. It's kind of interesting.
So 2 steps forward, see if Carol sends us something and forward that out to everybody and we can make a decision.
Do you have a way of scanning pictures or you can mail them?
I suspect that we can, and we can do that in
She
color,
seemed to-
provided that they're, or black and white, provided that they're a certain size.
She seemed to be on top of emailing
Okay.
from
Oh,
us,
so
so,
she's going to help me
so
Okay.
with Okay.
I'll ask her.
And the select board report is
Awesome.
good to go.
I didn't have a chance to read it, but I'm sure we spent a lot of time on earlier versions.
Well, this one, page 2, would be,
Yep.
go by the 24, but except with a different financing arrangement. Well, we could only do that if we went for another vote.
Is that the print?
Well, that's what will happen.
Okay.
Did you just make these notes? Just
Yeah.
now?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know, that's a vague statement that we don't really have an answer to. Is there a typo there? Something wrong?
Not a typo, but it just, I would add that just for clarity, but, you know. Doesn't have to be.
It'd be good if I could read your writing, but I can't.
Too small.
What does it say?
I couldn't tell you.
I can't read Pat's writing.
It's like Merry Christmas, capitalized.
It says, an estimate of the cost to bury the wires,
Oh,
and then capitalize the B in board. Because you're referring to a specific board, so it has to be
it's
capitalized.
not clear that that's what we're talking about.
Well, possibly. Good night, Ron. Good night, Sarah. It's not necessarily crystal clear, I don't think. So. All right, I'm gonna use the bathroom. That's fine.
That's what we're talking about here, I don't quite see.
Yeah, it's in the above paragraph, right?
Yeah?
Yeah. I think it's fine, but I'm no literary critic.
That's good.
Oh, good, thank you.
Sure looks a lot bigger on paper,
That's good.
longer on paper
Oh,
than
all of this.
reading it on your phone or something like that.
Yeah.
Are we finished?
I think so. So, talk about
Oh, yes.
the road. Andrew, how did the presentation at the 18 in Heartland go? Did you talk about the transportation app?
Transportation, no, someone, I didn't go, someone was there from.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if the board is aware of some of the work that, Andrew's been involved with but trying to address a need of transportation that Matt and I may be going into Hartford today or into the plazas, and we could share a ride if we knew we were going approximately the same time, same place. And Andrew's been involved with creating a software app that would do that. And I don't know if you stopped by tonight to talk about that, or you were just coming by to...
No, I didn't stop and talk about that, and I haven't helped create the app. But
Okay.
I put in a request
Who is that?
to the happening for Vital Communities that we have a Selectboard function,
Okay,
and that's in the works. And Paige at Vital Communities reached out to me today, and Craigslist has actually started a
oh,
ride sharing
Yeah.
service.
great,
So I'm gonna look into that and see if that might
yeah,
serve
good,
what I'm interested in.
yeah.
And what is your name, please?
Andrew Letzel, LMHTL.
You have any update on your notes or anything?
Yeah, I think it's, an important discussion or just an update on the highway department. Dan Moranci has moved on to the town of Hanover. In his departure, I did feel it necessary, and I thought there was an importance to advertise the position and see what was out there to fill that gap. Knowing that Greg Borkman is here, I just felt as though it was two different positions, and Dan's position, to lose somebody of that experience to at least see what was out there and what might be available. Due to that decision, Greg has given his notice, so unfortunately, even though I did have some conversations with him to try and have some patience and understand the situation and where we're at, he gave some other, I understand that, where he was working has come back and kind of said, we can't offer you something full-time. And that was the explanation that was provided to me. So, I think that there's some merit to that, and I think that he's been there, but I do think that my decision to do that did play a role in making that at least a thought process. So unfortunately, that's on me, but I did just feel the need to, I felt all along that Greg should be with us, and felt as though he was going to be an integral part of this. It was just a matter of, hey, if there is somebody out there that's available that does have a CDL that can plow and handle some of the heavy equipment, that would be beneficial to at least know if they're out there. So I took that step. I think that there was some perception that perhaps You know, he's been doing a good job for us, and that should have been, you know, my first and foremost thoughts. That certainly was not my intention, and felt as though, you know, that it was just something that I thought was good for the department and good for us, and it's unfortunate, but unfortunately that puts us where we're at, which does put us down. That being said, Greg did start to fill in nicely. He was taking over BJ's 1-ton route, and BJ got bumped up to essentially Dan's route. So we will be looking to essentially replace, we had advertised and continue to advertise Dan's position. And, you know, that maintains our priority, and we'll kind of assess what we've got, you know, after that, you know, as far as filling in. You know, this budget doesn't start until July 1st. So we will need to, you know, to fill the position, only to have to lay somebody off in April or March 15th. We'll need to kind of think about that a little bit. But the position does, if passes town meeting, would start July 1st. So obviously the impetus here is to fill the full-time highway position is our first and foremost, and then we'll kind of look at the buildings and grounds position. But just know that you know, those guys are gonna have a busy week, and you know, Greg is with us for a couple weeks, actually I'll say a few weeks, and I think is available to, you know, lend us a hand, but you know, that's kind of where we're at.
So he's resigned from the buildings and grounds?
He
position?
has.
So you essentially have 2 openings.
We do, yes.
So, have you advertised on Facebook or some other means other than the newspaper?
Indeed, which I've had a fair amount of success with in filling the finance position. We put that out there. We've gotten some responses, but we compared to the finance position, you know, it's a dribble. You know, and we got, you know, small feedback from the press, and we're getting some feedback from the internet, but it's a dribble. We got a couple to go on. You know, I think that given the news today, you know, I think we'll look at the couple that we've got, and that are possibilities, and if we need to put it back out there, well, that's what we'll need to do. So that is where we're at there. You know, the rest is kind of, you know, it's, you know, part of the written report if you have any questions, but I think that that's kind of the biggest and you know, foremost of what's consuming my time and kind of where we're at.
Anybody else got anything to bring up?
What's triggering Green Mountain Power to move poles when there being such a...
Because it's easier,
Maintenance.
maintenance.
Well, it's not easy to move a pole. I mean,
No, but
No,
for
but-
power outages.
Okay,
It's
That's
right
why they-
along the
that's
road.
what's triggering it. Okay.
Yeah, otherwise they gotta get a 4-wheeler. I mean, you're off cross-country through snow and snowbanks or
Yeah.
mud storms, farms.
Climbing
Yeah.
full by hand, everything,
Mm.
doing everything by hand, pulley blocks, pulling up wires. It's much easier with those buckets, they have all kinds of power tools go along with those things.
I'm glad the Percy case came out the way it did.
But it's not done yet.
Well, could be done unless there's another
Right.
conflict.
Yeah, and he expressed at least prior to that, he stipulated that he thought the value, if he lost on the one, he wouldn't,
Wouldn't argue the next.
argue the next. And
Yeah.
I know a letter went out to him, reminding, saying, hey, you still thinking that way?
Yeah.
But I haven't seen or heard of a response.
Okay. We're done, I guess. I think we're all set.
Our next meeting is